The battle for the Iron Throne is over. Aegon Targaryen VI, the hidden prince, has claimed his birthright. But the true war was never for a crown. It was for the survival of all mankind. As we saw in the previous parts, the world believed Daenerys was the last Targaryen. But there was another, Aegon VI, son of Rhaegar Targaryen, hidden away since infancy, raised to reclaim his father's throne. With the Golden Company and the Lords of Westeros behind him, he succeeded where others failed. Jon Snow, the king in the north, accepted him not as an enemy, but as an ally. Together, they vowed to stand against the true enemy, the Night King and his army of the dead. The dead are here. The wall is the last line of defense. And if it falls, Westeros falls with it. Winterfell has seen many wars, but never one like this. For the first time in history, all of Westeros stands united, not for a king, not for a throne, but for survival. Aegon Targaryen VI has already been in Winterfell for weeks, standing beside Jon Snow to prepare for the war ahead. His arrival was met with skepticism, but his actions have earned the respect of many. The banners of Dorne, the Stormlands, the Reach, the Riverlands, the Vale, and the Westerlands now fly alongside the dire wolf of House Stark. The free folk have gathered, ready to fight for the realm that once called them enemies. Even the Golden Company, once a sellsword army, now stands as Westerosi warriors. Only one kingdom refused the call, the Iron Islands. But the rest of Westeros has come, united in a way never seen before. Inside the Great Hall, the most powerful warriors and lords of the realm gather. Lannister soldiers stand beside Northmen. The free folk eye the Knights of the South with suspicion, but no swords are drawn. The last war has begun. Silence fills the hall as Lyanna Mormont steps forward, her presence commanding attention despite her size. She looks up at Aegon, her eyes sharp. "The North remembers false kings," she says, her voice unwavering. "The North remembers betrayal. So tell me, Dragon King, why should we fight for you?" The murmurs in the hall grow. The Northerners do not trust easily, and a Dragon King means little to them. Jon watches carefully, waiting for Aegon's response. Aegon does not bristle at the challenge. Instead, he steps forward, removes his sword, and kneels. Not in submission, but in recognition. "I do not ask you to trust my crown," he says, his voice firm. "Crown means nothing to the dead. I ask you to trust my sword." The room holds its breath. Lyanna Mormont narrows her eyes, studying him. Then, finally, she nods. The tension in the hall shifts. The North will fight beside Aegon VI. Elsewhere in Winterfell, a different kind of war takes place. The battle between truth and identity. Samwell Tarly, carrying the weight of knowledge no man should bear alone, reveals to Jon Snow the secret hidden for nearly 2 decades. Jon is not the son of Eddard Stark. He never was. His true name is Aegon Targaryen, the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, hidden away to protect him from Robert Baratheon's wrath. The revelation shakes Jon to his core. His entire life has been built on a lie, but one told to keep him safe. The honor of Ned Stark, the father he loved, now carries a deeper meaning. Jon was never a bastard. He was a prince, hidden in plain sight. But a prince to what? The Iron Throne is already claimed by Aegon VI, the brother he never knew, and Jon has no desire to take it from him. The North follows him, not because of his blood, but because of his actions. For Jon Snow, nothing has changed. He will fight for the living, not for crowns or names. For weeks, Aegon and Sansa have stood together, planning, strategizing, watching over Winterfell. In that time, something else has formed between them, something unspoken yet undeniable. Sansa has never trusted easily. She has seen rulers come and go, each one more cruel than the last. But Aegon is different. He listens. He considers. He does not force her to kneel, nor does he demand loyalty through fear. And Aegon, surrounded by warriors and lords, has found himself drawn to Sansa's mind, her strength, her quiet but unyielding will. She challenges him, and he respects her all the more for it. On the night before he leaves for the wall, they find themselves alone on the battlements, the cold wind brushing against them. Sansa watches the soldiers below, but her thoughts are elsewhere. Aegon watches her carefully. He knows the burden she carries, the pain she has endured, and yet she stands, unbroken, sharp as Valyrian steel. She does not beg him to stay. She does not ask him to be careful. But in the way her fingers tighten around the stone ledge, in the way her breath is just a little unsteady, Aegon understands. Before either of them can think twice, Sansa closes the distance and kisses him. Aegon is surprised at first, but he does not pull away. He deepens the kiss, his hand resting gently against her cheek. When they part, Sansa's gaze remains locked on his. There is no hesitation, no regret, only certainty. She whispers 4 simple words. "Come back to me." Aegon nods, the smallest of smiles tugging at his lips. Without another word, he turns and walks away, knowing he has something more than a war to fight for. The wall has stood for thousands of years, an unbreakable shield against the horrors beyond. But now, the horrors have come, not as scattered raiders, but as a force greater than any living man has ever seen. The dead stretch beyond the horizon, an endless tide of pale hands and frozen eyes, surging forward like a storm. The wall has held against the worst of winter, but never against this. Bran Stark does not see the world as others do. His body remains still, his hands resting on the wooden arms of his chair, but his mind soars high above the battlefield. Through the eyes of 1,000 crows, he watches the dead move, an endless tide of ice and shadow, their march relentless. He sees their strategy before it unfolds, the twin axes of their assault. The Whites will climb, using their own bodies as a living ladder, while the giants, 50 of them, will hammer through the gates of the wall, breaking open the last barrier between the north and the rest of Westeros. With a sharp breath, Bran returns to himself. He looks to the men around him, Ser Davos, Tormund Giantsbane, Jaime Lannister, and Beric Dondarrion. "They're almost here," he says. "Prepare yourselves." The first attack is relentless. Thousands of Whites throw themselves against the ice, clawing, grasping, tearing at each other in their desperate attempt to climb. Arrows rain down from above, blackening the sky, piercing skulls and shattering bones. But for every White that falls, 10 others take its place. They pile onto each other, forming a shifting, writhing mass of bodies that presses higher and higher. On top of the wall, Gendry grips his warhammer, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Beside him, Tormund swings his axe, cutting down anything that dares to breach the edge. The free folk fight like men possessed, knowing there is no retreat, no refuge. Tormund roars as he drives his axe into a White skull, sending it tumbling down the icy slope. He turns to Gendry, grinning despite the madness around them. "This is the kind of fight that makes a man a legend, boy!" he bellows. Gendry barely manages a breath before another wave crashes into them. He swings his hammer, caving in the chest of a White Walker minion, the body collapsing into shards of ice. But they keep coming. Further down beneath the wall, the true horror begins. 50 giants move in formation, each one taller than 2 men, their deep growls echoing through the frozen air. They march toward the 3 gates still open along the wall, their massive hands wrapping around the reinforced wood and iron. Each one stands twice the height of a man, their fists like battering rams. They move in unison, their deep growls shaking the air. The men stationed at the tunnels brace for the impact, swords drawn, spears lowered. At Castle Black, Aegon stands at the head of his men, clad in armor that bears the 3-headed dragon of House Targaryen. He grips his sword, Blackfire, the ancestral weapon of his family, the steel gleaming in the torchlight. Next to him are Jaime Lannister, Brienne of Tarth, and Sandor Clegane. "Hold the line!" Aegon commands, his voice cutting through the chaos. "No matter what comes through that gate, we do not break!" The first impact is thunderous. The wooden doors groan under the strain, splintering but holding. Then comes the second strike, and the third. The hinges snap. The gates explode inward. The giants charge. Aegon meets them head on. Aegon leads his forces into the darkness, steel flashing against ice. The tunnels become a slaughterhouse, the narrow stone corridors filled with the roars of dying men and the thunderous footsteps of giants crashing forward. Jaime fights with desperate precision, dodging the massive swings of the undead, his golden hand glinting as he parries and slashes. He moves with the cold efficiency of a man who has nothing left to prove. Every strike is measured, every step calculated. He is not the young warrior who once sought glory. He is simply a man trying to survive. Beside him, Aegon fights with the fury of a king who refuses to fall. Black fire carves through the undead, its Valyrian steel singing with each stroke. He sidesteps a giant's crushing blow, rolling under its legs before diving his sword deep into its exposed ankle. The beast howls, toppling forward as knights swarm it, stabbing wildly. But there are too many. Brienne ducks beneath the wild swing of a giant's massive club, rolling to the side before driving her sword into its knee. The creature bellows in rage, stumbling. Sandor Clegane fights beside her, his great sword hacking through undead flesh. He has never feared death. Fire, yes. Death, no. But giants are another thing. He dodges another crushing blow, then lunges, burying his blade into the soft flesh beneath the giant's ribs. The monster roars, swinging wildly. Brienne and Sandor push forward on one side, hacking through whites. But as Brienne is lifted by a giant's crushing grip, Jaime sees it happen. He lunges toward her, but he is too late. He watches, horror-stricken, as the life leaves her eyes before her body is hurled into the stone wall. Jaime does not hesitate. He charges, grief fueling his blade. His sword cuts deep into the giant's knee, and as it staggers, Aegon leaps onto its back, stabbing down into the base of its skull. The creature lets out a final, guttural groan before collapsing into the snow. Then, the real danger emerges. Through the smoke and chaos, the Night King steps into the tunnel. Aegon turns, his grip tightening on Blackfire. He has faced battle before, but this is different. He can feel it in the air, the presence of death itself. Jaime shouts for Aegon and Sandor to fall back, but before they can react, the tunnel quakes. A giant, wounded but not yet dead, crashes into one of the tunnel supports. The ceiling groans. Sandor Clegane stands his ground in the tunnel, swinging his sword into the last of the charging giants. The ceiling collapses around him. and as the weight of ice and stone crashes down, he lets out one final defiant laugh, welcoming the darkness like an old friend. The wall of ice and stone crashes down, cutting off Jaime and Aegon from the rest of the tunnel. They are forced to retreat into Castle Black, but the Night King follows. They do not hesitate. Aegon, bloodied but unbroken, raises black fire and charges. Jaime follows, golden hand glinting in the firelight as he fights beside him. But the Night King is unstoppable. He parries Aegon's blade with effortless precision, then strikes, sending the young king crashing against the stone walls. Jaime swings with all his might, but the icy figure catches his sword midair and throws him aside like a broken doll. And then, the Night King steps forward, entering the courtyard of Castle Black. Inside the courtyard of Castle Black, the battle is already lost. The dead flood through the tunnels, cutting down defenders as they push forward. Knights and free folk alike fall in droves. The air is filled with the screams of the dying. At the far end of the courtyard, Bran Stark remains still, his eyes glazed white as his consciousness soars through the sky, watching the battle unfold through the eyes of a crow circling above. Beric Dondarrion stands before him, his flaming sword casting flickering light against the snow. He has seen death before. He has died before. But this time, he knows there will be no return. The first giant reaches them, its eyes burning with cold fire. Beric moves. He ducks beneath a sweeping blow, slashing his sword across the beast's leg. The flames bite deep, searing flesh. The giant stumbles, roaring. A second giant lunges. Beric pivots, bringing his sword up in a desperate arc. The blade catches the creature's throat, cutting through muscle, through bone. It collapses with an earth-shaking crash. But the third giant does not stop. With a terrible roar, it swings down. Beric tries to dodge, but he is too slow. The blow slams into him, crushing him into the snow. His sword flickers, then goes dark. Bran remains untouched, his expression unreadable. The Night King watches from the broken gate. Then, he moves. With slow, deliberate steps, he enters Castle Black, his generals following in silence. The defenders, broken and scattered, pull back. Only one man remains in the courtyard, gripping Longclaw, his breath visible in the freezing air. Jon Snow. Their eyes lock. No words are spoken. Jon moves first, swinging with all his strength. The Night King parries effortlessly, the clash of Valyrian steel against ice sending a ringing shockwave through the air. The duel is brutal. Jon attacks, the Night King counters. Sparks fly as their blades meet again and again. Jon grits his teeth, his arms burning from the effort. The Night King is unyielding. With a sudden strike, he sends Jon sprawling into the snow. Above them, hidden in the shadows of Castle Black's upper levels, Arya Stark watches. Silent as death itself, she leaps. The Night King senses her. He turns just as she descends, his hand snapping up to catch her by the throat. The force of his grip drives her into the snow, her dagger slipping from her grasp. The cold seeps into her skin, her vision darkening, but Jon sees his chance. The Night King is distracted, only for a second, but a second is all Jon needs. With a roar, he lunges forward, gripping Longclaw with both hands, and drives the sword straight through the Night King's chest. For the first time, the Night King falters. His ice blue eyes widen in something almost like surprise. A deep, resonant crack echoes through the air. Then, his body splinters, fractures running through him like breaking glass. A gust of icy wind sweeps through Castle Black as he shatters into 1,000 frozen shards. The White Walkers collapse where they stand, their bodies disintegrating into nothingness. Across the battlefield, the Whites fall like puppets with their strings cut, lifeless once more. The giants crumble, their hollow roars fading into silence. And just like that, the Great War is over. The battle is over. The dead no longer walk. A stillness settles over Castle Black, broken only by the howling wind and the crackling of pyres. The bodies of whites and fallen warriors litter the ground, frozen in twisted, unnatural poses. The wall stands in eerie silence, its ancient stone scarred by the battle that nearly ended the world of the living. As the fires burn low and the first light of dawn creeps over the frozen battlefield, the survivors prepare to leave Castle Black. There is nothing left for them here. The wall still stands, but its purpose is fulfilled. The Night's Watch has no reason to exist anymore. The world has changed, and now the living must decide what comes next. Jon Snow watches as men gather what they can, as the wounded are tended to, as the dead are given their final rest. He knows they will not have time to bury them all. They will leave behind a graveyard of ice and blood, a monument to the last stand of the living. Aegon stands nearby, his armor dented, his royal cloak torn and stained with battle. He does not look like a king, not in this moment. He looks like a soldier, one who has survived when so many others have not. Sansa's face flashes in his mind. Winterfell, the Iron Throne, the world waiting for him beyond these frozen ruins. But none of that matters now. Not yet. The ride south is slow. The wounded slow their march. The dead weigh heavy on their minds. The North had suffered, but it had survived. When they reach Winterfell, the gates open before them, and the people rush to meet their returning warriors. There are cheers, there are tears, but above all there is relief. The war is over. Sansa is waiting for them at the entrance, her expression unreadable. Her eyes lock onto Aegon's first, searching, questioning. He gives a small nod. It is done. Then her gaze shifts to Jon. For a long moment, they do not speak. Then finally, she steps forward and wraps her arms around him. He stiffens at first, surprised, but then he lets himself return the embrace. He is home. Inside the Great Hall, a feast is prepared, not in celebration, but in remembrance. The banners of the North hang beside the banners of the Targaryens. Fire and ice. Aegon stands before the gathered lords and ladies, flanked by Jon and Sansa. He does not speak of victory. He speaks of sacrifice, of those lost, of the price they paid to see another day. He promises the North that their way of life will not change, that he does not seek to rule them as a conqueror, but as an ally. The North has bent the knee before, but this time it will be by choice. And so, Jon Snow stands before the lords of the North, and they do not call him king. They call him Warden of the North, the protector of his people, the one who led them through the long night. Jon does not want a crown, and for once, no one asks him to take one. Aegon turns to Sansa. The tension that had built between them in the past weeks has turned into something else. A quiet understanding, a shared burden, and something deeper, something neither of them can quite name. He steps forward, his voice steady. Winterfell belongs to the Starks, as it always has, but the realm must be rebuilt, and I would not do it alone. A pause. The great hall is silent. Then Sansa Stark rises from her seat. And for the first time in generations, the North does not stand against a Targaryen. It stands with them. The war is over. The realm will heal, and a new age begins.